what I've got open here is the COIN-OP template. And you guys should have got this with your download for the month. I just sent that out a couple days ago. And this is designed to be a somewhat authentic 8-bit recreation. And maybe I'll just start a little bit by talking about like what the 8-bit chips were like on the Nintendo, and even the Game Boy was pretty similar. But there was really only a couple different sounds those things could make. One channel was the triangle channel, and I have an instrument set up here, and this is sampled from the Nintendo itself. I can even I can open up the simpler and turn it into sampler, and we've got just these triangle waves coming straight out of the Nintendo.
Bass.
Yes, these were used for bass more than anything else, because the triangle sound is it's kind of close to a sine wave, really. If we play one, it's got a little more harmonics than a sine wave, but it's pretty simple sound, and there's not much you can do to it on the Nintendo itself. There's really just, I think there's just volume for it, and that's it. Not a lot more you can do with it, and it would be monophonic, but it does get these really like rich bass tones all the way down to, that's the lowest it would play. So these are the bass tones you'll hear in a lot of those old games, that triangle sound. You can recreate this using a synthesizer like Analog. If you drop Analog on a track, I'll just take it here. We'll make Analog doesn't have a triangle. What am I talking about? We'll do Operator then. Operator will have a triangle, and it's digital, but got that filter. We'll turn that off. I think that's not quite as bright, but it's the general sound. The Nintendo does have this like really gritty 8-bit kind of like I don't know if aliasing is the word, but like up high you get that kind of nice bit reduction sort of sound going on. And so that's triangle wave. And then the Nintendo also has 2 other channels that you can produce melodies on. So there's really only 3 channels for melodies. There's the triangle, and then there's 2 pulse waves. And the pulse wave is basically a square wave where you can modulate the pulse width. You can turn it like into a rectangle wave. And that is, we can open this up. Again, I'll just go into the sampler. And this one will be a little more going on here. There are 4 different duty cycles, which means like 4 different types of pulse waves or square wave variations. We got this one here, which is like really kind of small, and that should be set. So that's what we have right now. It's a very kind of narrow sound. And then we got the next level up, which is a little bit thicker, a little closer to a square wave. So you can see the shape is a little different. And let's get to the second one here. And maybe hear the difference, kind of thin. And then we can, I'll take you to the third one, which is here. And now it's a little more like a square wave. It's a little more even. And that would sound like this. Very video gamey. And then this is the fourth one here, which is pretty similar. Take you through the different sounds. And those are really all you have to work with as far as tones go. Not a lot more you can do with it. There's also a noise channel, which we have here, which is just straight up white noise. can pitch it around on this. And like a lot of the like kind of maybe like a rocket ship sound was done with things like that. Some of the drums are even done with this, like little real short bursts. Sometimes are used like for things like snare drums. And I'm gonna actually give us a
Yeah, in Zelda, pretty much all the drums are just snare drums. That's noise.
yeah, just find the right pitch there, but it's pretty much just there's no real drum sounds. But what I did there was increase the pitch bend range, and it gives you more of the room to do sort of like spaceships and race car sounds. Move the pitch bend wheel there. And what is really fun to, if you're into this, like if you go into some of the old games and just like listen to the way they got the sounds, you know, just pay attention to knowing that there's just a few different types of tones, but they're very creative in how they made those possible by doing things like just it reminds me really like of like Foley in movies, how they'll I've recently just watched this video about how they made like these like Mortal Kombat sounds in some of the later games where they're basically you know, Mortal Kombat, a super violent video game where they're like ripping heads off and body parts and just mangling each other. But a lot of those sounds they make by like smashing fruit and like digging in with their hands and like cantaloupes and just getting those squishy sounds that way. But when you put it in the context with the visual, it really does change how it gets perceived. And they're very creative in how they're able to like make these little worlds with just this very, very small palette of sounds. And having like kind of dived into this a little bit, it's just it's fascinating, and the creativity and the songwriting is just awesome and amazing with so few things. The Nintendo is really only capable of making 5 sounds at a time. And for the most part, they really only used 3 channels. They really only used the triangle, the pulses, and the noise. Now, just so in case you're wondering, on this template, I just threw in a 3rd pulse wave here just to give us a little bonus in 2020. You know, we can cheat a little. But if you wanted to go officially 8-bit, you would just maybe take this track out or not use it. And all right.
That's funny you said that about the 3rd pulse wave, because
Mhm.
for my mix of the Zelda 2 battle song, there's always this one little line which I wish was emphasized more. So I
Yeah.
like used analog to make a new like square wave
Oh,
and add
yeah.
that little line, and I called it square 3.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, so you kind of said this needs to be in there and just went for it. Why not, you know? If you listen to some of the games, sometimes when you do certain actions, maybe like if you like get a coin or something, it uses like some of these channels just to make those sound effects. Sometimes just like, it's not a great example, but sometimes they just use like some of these really fast, you know, like just little
Well,
like,
and they have to reuse the channels too. Like in
yeah,
Zelda 1, when it's beeping when you're in the dungeon, it has to take away one of those square waves. So like I always thought the
yeah,
music got more ominous, and I always thought it was intentional as a kid.
right. Yeah, you get that like chiming. It's like beep, boop, beep, boop, beep to indicate like you're almost out of energy. And you lose a whole melody line in there because they needed to use that. So sometimes you'll hear these dropouts when little sound effects happen and the music will cut out real quick. The other channel they have is a sample channel, but apparently they didn't use it a whole lot. They sometimes would use it for drums, and that's actually what I've got here. These are some kicks and snares and sounds from various games. The Nintendo cartridge I used for this actually had some samples already loaded into it.
I guess it's delta modulated. I don't really know anything about that.
Yeah, and there are controls on there, and sometimes you like a subtle move just changes everything. Um, they didn't really use it a lot though. Surprisingly, like one game in particular that um, did make use of it was Super Mario Brothers 3. If you listen to the song on that, like in the opening world, there's like a steel drum sample they use, and that was like pretty unusual at the time to do. But some games, especially later on, started using like the sample channel for drum samples. They were pretty good for.
Yeah, I know the steel drum you're talking about.
Yeah.
So working with these Zelda 1 samples,
Mhm.
there's this boss sample. Zelda 1, when you're like next to a boss room, you can like hear them breathing, and they use a sample channel
Yes.
for that. I'm
Yeah, you do.
convinced that they sampled Godzilla and then pitched it down, and that's what they used for the source.
Oh yeah.
Here, listen to this. Let me see if it. And then if I pitch that up a little bit,
We didn't really hear it.
oh, you can't hear that. All right, well, never mind.
I know what you're talking about though. It's like roar, and it's kind of muffled sounding to show like you're in the room next to the boss.
Yeah, it does the same exact pitch rise thing that the '80s Godzilla does.
Hmm. That's interesting. I wonder if. Well, what this I kind of cheated. This is another place where we're going a little bit off the authentic, like true to the hardware um, sounds, because some of these sounds do come from. There's some 16-bit samples in here. These ones in particular. Game called Toe Jam and Earl for the Sega Genesis. Um, really awesome game. Great music, but that's something
That
in
game
it.
is awesome.
These, I believe, are Street Fighter 2 punches and kicks. And just what I did for this section here is basically go into like the sound test of various video games and just grab little tiny sounds and make them into percussion that you can use. So a bunch there. But these ones down here, you can really hear like the Nintendo sampling as that decays. You hear it gets like gritty towards the end. That is just like exactly trademarks what the sound of the Nintendo was like. That really low resolution sampling. If you were to use something like a Redux on your sounds, you'll really notice it when you lower the bit rate. Where are you? Like if I would just put this here, when you lower this bit reduction here, this is kind of redundant here that I'm doing it now, but towards the end you get that grit, and you'll notice that a lot on things like reverb tails. If you use this, like it'll give you that kind of crumbling apart, because it can't really accurately reproduce the gradual diminishing of the volume. So because it doesn't have enough resolution, and we get that kind of like
I really
gritty.
noticed that working on the project I'm working on, because
Mhm.
the songs have loop points, but then there's also a fade out at the end. And so I'm sticking 8-bit on each track just to like make sure it's in 8-bit just for the heck of it. And as it fades out, it's like way louder than it normally would be because of that sample reduction. Is like the only samples it can give you are like louder ones, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, and when you use the actual hardware um, on the Nintendo, like there's like there are volume controls. So I probably should have mentioned this, but I use this thing called the Midi NES, um, which I could show you a picture, but I'll just explain it. Basically, it's just a cartridge you put into your Nintendo, and it has a MIDI cable that comes out. Um, you can't really get them anymore. I got this thing probably 15 years ago, but I guess the person that makes it doesn't do it anymore. But there is another one called Chip Maestro, which I think is a similar idea. But you know, like we have like volume knobs in our master fader here in live, like you can fade down and it's a really smooth decline. But on the 8-bit systems, you fade down in steps. It's like here, then it's here, then it's here, then it's here. It's not a smooth thing. And that's kind of really like every aspect of the sound is like that. There's nothing smooth about it. It's just in steps. And it's really kind of like the pixels on the screen. When you look at the characters, they're just made up of little boxes. The sound is really pretty similar in that way. The percussion stuff here is mostly just some like some samples from games, but different like little noise sounds, you know, different like pitches of the noise. And when you play them together, you can kind of create like, some of these are going down the pipe in Mario Brothers. So I did sneak some 16-bit ones in. That's a Sonic the Hedgehog ring. Collect those. These more up here are kind of more of the authentic ones that are just really the noises. And these are used for all kinds of things, whether it's percussion or even just like footsteps. You know, you might be like walking up the stairs in a game, little explosions. And sequence them into little beats, which is kind of a fun thing to do too. We talked about the noise. And then for this, I just made a resample channel in case you want to resample the audio, things that you're doing, and just get it on a separate channel. Sometimes that's kind of handy if you're performing live. You can just sort of sample things you've done. Oh, I didn't talk about the effects. On these different channels, we've got various effects you can use to make your sound more 8-bitty, like a bit crusher. And then the other stuff is more like for fun, like a chorus, which you would not be able to do on the original system. But I wanted it to be not just strictly for 8-bit music. If you want to make 8-bit style music or something that's like kind of reminiscent of it, you have like these effects that can be pretty handy too. And the sidechain pump is listening to the drum channel. So if we look in there, all this is doing is listening to our drums so that we can make a beat and have it automatically sidechained. So it just turns up the, I believe it's the mix there. Lets us get some. Well, that just turns it on and off actually. So all the way down, no side chaining, and then past 64, and you've got side chaining. So it'll duck the music to the drum, which will give you like kind of a nice pumping feeling, which again, you couldn't do in the original ones. But
before you get too far away from chorus, I wanted to mention something on that.
Yeah,
you said you can't do chorus in there. This is one of the examples where they kind of fake something. In Zelda 1, the title screen, they actually have two of the square waves playing the exact same thing, but the timing's slightly off. So you're getting that phase offset that's changing through time, and it kind of sort of sounds like chorus in mono.
Yeah, right. Okay, that's cool. That's a great example of how they're just creative with it. You know, they get those waves to be out of phase with each other. That opening has a really nice kind of vibe to it for that. Another like,
and I guess you could think of the channel dropping out as sidechaining too.
When they have to use like another sound, like an effect.
That's like automatic sidechaining. It's really extreme sidechaining, but
yeah, like gating, really, right? I've got on here. So if we're looking at like one of the pulse channels, you've got a way to fade in your sounds so they don't have to be so instant. And you might think of that kind of like the volume that they were able to do. though this would be a little bit smoother. And we got the decay and sustain, so we can make these into like little plucks. Or we can have longer releases too. Nice long release on this end. Bit of sculpting you can do with the sounds here. I'm gonna bring them all down. I've using, I think I gotta switch this over to Sampler to show you this, but using the MIDI capabilities of Sampler, I've mapped Aftertouch to be the LFO amount for pitch, which is over here. So we got just a little bit of pitch modulation at about 4.5 hertz. And as I increase the pressure on a pad, we get a little vibrato.
Nice.
So you can kind of get like a little bit of expression. And they do have that on those old games. They got some pitch vibrato in there, which is pretty nice on certain sounds, certain soundtracks. And glide is also another thing you might have. That was a capability they had, like a pitch drop. And so you've got that right there. I put a filter on there because, you know, that sounds nice. Again, not something you'd be able to do on the old system. That's an advanced feature. You got your pulse width here. On the original Nintendo, they were able to modulate the pulse width in real time. And this is something I can't actually do with Sampler. We can do it as I change notes, but I can't do it during a note. It's just not, to my knowledge, not possible with samples to do any kind of pulse width like this. But I'll maybe show you another way we can kind of fake it with the arpeggiator. So they very often used arpeggiators to imply chords. Since we only had monophonic sounds, you can't play chords unless you dedicate 2 channels of pulse. You can do like kind of harmonies and maybe even with a triangle and make it a triad. But that's about the best you could do. But you could use arpeggios. So you could hold the chord shape and it sort of implies the chord. You know, we get like, it's like a major triad. We play around with the octaves if we wanted to. Sometimes they go so fast they'd almost use them as like sound effects too. Almost sounds like a motor after a while. But you could now, with this, since you have the different notes triggering, you could play around with the pulse width, and it kind of gives the illusion of pulse width modulation. And also on the ARP, just a couple extra controls I threw in were some of the, right in here, just to play around with the velocities. So you can fix the velocity if you don't want like different volume levels. Just turn this all the way up. Wherever you turn this really will give you a fixed velocity. So you can't get different variations in volume. And we also have random velocity too. So those volume fluctuations are just totally random in that case. A little something you can use on the arpeggiator is the velocity section here, which you can kind of get like some of the effects that they would do in some of the old games. So if we were to turn that all the way down to 0 in maybe just about like a second or so, we can kind of get it. It's not really. So you get kind of like a fade out. I might even want to play with this more. Sometimes at like really high speeds. It kind of sounds like some kind of effect maybe for some game you might have in there. I'll bring this back down so it's not too out of control. But that's kind of how they worked it. With far fewer capabilities than we had. Animus, so you were saying like the Japanese version had that extra channel. Was it just another like pulse wave, or was it something different?
I think it's from the disc because they also had a disc.
Oh yeah.
And so they could use that, and they didn't all that often because it used a lot of data. Kind of like how the sample channel isn't used that much because it uses a lot of data, uses a lot of storage, so they just only use it occasionally when it's important. Other than that, I don't really know anything about it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's a point worth making too. This is back in the days when like the tiniest files were, you know, really tremendous. Like you'd have like a disk for a computer, and you can only hold like a couple like Word. They weren't even Word. They were like Word perfect documents or just straight up text documents, and that would like fill the whole thing up. I forget the exact sizes of those, but in order to have those kinds of samples, it is insanely like they're so small, and sometimes the samples would actually be like extremely short just to accommodate and fit. Oh, Chris, I see you're gonna be heading out. I'm glad you made it though. Thanks for stopping by. And
it's been cool. Thanks. And,
yeah, if you make anything with any of the stuff, let me know. I'd love to hear it.
I will.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Cool.
Stick around for another 5.
Nice. Yeah, that's something like that's easy to forget, right? That even just like a drum sample was like a major consideration at that time, even though it was super low resolution. It was a lot to have that in your game. That could mean the difference from some other things that you might want to do with the graphics or whatever, the gameplay. So they were pretty crafty with that. Let's see. So COIN-OP is like nice if you want to do be a little more authentic, and it's kind of set up. I didn't even talk about the drum fills. This is worth mentioning. So let's say you make a beat. This will be our beat. We'll put some hi-hats in there. Just keep it nice and simple. And here we go. So these drum fills and everything are designed so that I can click on like here, go back to my beat real quick. So the way I would use these myself is I would MIDI map these to a controller, which I guess we can turn on the old the APC 40 right here. I know you can't really see what I'm doing, but just to give you a quick idea, maybe I'll just go into my MIDI mapping, and I'll select like that snare drum, and we'll just turn that on this button here. Come out of MIDI mapping, and I can have my drum playing. And play that, and it's set up. These fills are all set up. If you notice down in the quantization here, they're at eighth notes. So normally things are set to global quantization, which is usually at 1 bar, and that's up here. So that's why when you launch a clip, it starts at the beginning of the next bar because your global quantization is set to 1. But by changing these to eighth notes, it gives the kind of like feeling like I can just start a fill whenever I want. And when I want it to stop, I can just launch this clip again and it'll come back on time on the beat. And these, I believe, are just styles of snare rolls. And we're back into our beat. And you can program a whole bunch of these if you wanted to. You can add them in. I've got just a kick beat here, and these are both set to the global quantization, but I just thought these were kind of handy beats to have. Just things I think we all use a lot, 4-to-the-floor kick drum. But these guys are where things get a little interesting. If I were to launch one of these, we are going randomly through all of these. So these are all set up to have, they're again, eighth note quantization, and they're just a bunch of, I don't know if I would say random, but they're just a bunch of different drum fills. But what makes it random is these follow actions. So the follow actions here are set up to play at, they're gonna play for a 16th note, and then it's going to change to any of these other clips. So it's referring to any of these in this little group, this like yellowish green. They're all adjacent. So they're all included in the follow action to go to any other clip after playing 16th. They're also set to legato mode, which means they remain in sync. So I think these are all just one bar. If you notice when they start, they don't start at the beginning. They start wherever the last one left off. So again, all this crazy randomness. It'll like never be the same twice. And the way I like to use these is I'll go into Midi mapping, and it doesn't really matter which one I pick, honestly, because I mean, it matters a little bit because you'll always get that one first. But if I just pick this one, Midi map that, I'm going to just bring down this IO and these sends. We don't really need to see those right now. And this, just so we can kind of see everything. So I've got my drum beat here. And I can rant, just hit that button, and it'll just play a little random fill, and then I can go back to my beat, just like I did with the other one. Building like a little drum beat. It's like pretty easy to have this beat stay interesting because I can just throw in a little fill real quick. I can start with this one, then go to my snare roll. Back in, we can combine the two. And you get these like crazy little fills every time. Oh, Chris left. Okay. So long, Chris. So this is actually something I do in my live sets also, is have these drums set up for these fills so that I can do all this like kind of crazy stuff. And it's really easy to just keep my my APC 40 is kind of locked in where it is on the clips I'm working on. But then I got these other buttons just to kind of launch fills that I can do at any time. And then just I go right back to the clip that it was playing. Nice and simple way of keeping things fun and exciting. And another way we can add some fills is with this rack here. So this rack is really just a bunch of beat repeats. Quarter note. So this one's set to quarter note. This one's set to eighth notes. This one is, I think that might be the, oh, this is 16th. I didn't label that one right, I guess. 16th. There's a whole bunch of them, but they're all these knobs get mapped to here. So we got one that will, well, really the best way to show you how these work is to just play the beat and play these knobs. But I don't like to use these as knobs. I actually like to use these as buttons. I like to map these as buttons. So when I press the button, it just goes all the way up. Because all these knobs are doing, if you watch this one here, this guy there, I guess we can close this out. We don't need that. Once I get past 64, it turns it on. Just turns it on. So I don't really want to be turning the knob to do that. I'd much rather press a button. So I will just map a few buttons here. Well, let's see. I got this controller. Click on this. We'll map that one. Map that one. This is the drop. This is the mutes. Then we got. We can come out of it. So I can play my beat. That quarter note. I caught the snare drum when I did that. And turn it off, and then I went back to the beat. It's a 30-second note. There's a little bit of timing that goes with this. Sometimes you catch silence, which is what I just did there. We got, this is a repeat with the drop with the pitch fade out. I guess I have a reverb on there too. That can be a fun little way to like bring yourself into some kind of breakdown or something. Then just the mute switch, which I find really handy. I can have my beat going and just mute it. The variable beat repeat will give us like triplets. Different timings. We've got 16th note, which is very similar to the other two. 8th note, quarter note. That is also fading out and pitching down. That one's like not grabbing it. There we go. Combine all of this stuff together, and you can start making some interesting beats. Like that. So this is like kind of designed really for like performance, but you could, of course, use it just to like compose your track. But I think it's like kind of a fun way to make your drums more hands-on and more like a performance. Animus wants Live 11 to have a macro knob into a switch. That would be kind of cool. Just a button, I guess. Not a bad idea. What else we got? Just our last rack here is sub filtering. This is a high pass. This is low pass. Just things you can do. In combination with some of the fills, you can have a good time. Make little fun things like that happen. You have plenty of possibilities there with that. Let's not again miss anything in here. Percussion Rack has also an arpeggiator, which is kind of handy. So you can just kind of hold down some. You want to make percussion with just holding down a few. And that could be another way to do fills too, or just like other layers of different kinds of drums style stuff. But that is really like how the COIN-OP works. The Super 8-bit pack which also is part of the download for the month, just has a lot more sounds. They're all based on Nintendo and Game Boy sounds, and you get the plain instruments, which are the more like true to the original sounds, like the pulse wave here from the Nintendo, which is similar to what we have here. Just some controls there. There's like a risk or distortion or a little saturation. I think that's just one of the drive modes. The Synth Boy is the Game Boy. It's the device I use to make the Game Boy. And this one has both of them in there. So it's kind of like combinations of the two. What's kind of fun about this is you've got a layer of the Synth Boy and a layer of the NES, and you can build like some big wide sounding things. Change the type of waveform on just the Synth Boy or the Game Boy. Change the octave. Have a little fun with that. Adjust the volumes and the pans. But I think where this gets like kind of fun is in some of these, in the tweaked instruments, which is where I take those original samples and then just have some fun with them, make all kinds of sounds. These are not at all meant to be true to the Nintendo, but it uses it as a source. So this is using the Nintendo noise to make this kind of crazy falling missile sound. This one's called Explosion. Ships. But then some of them are more melodic stuff. Let's just double click to do that. Chirpy birds. This one's kind of fun because when you hold down the key, you get the long pitch drop. But if you just kind of tap them, you can still play it kind of melodically. And there's like 100 of these, so there's a lot to go through. But so I would say, like Animus brought up earlier, like there are people that want to do like very authentic chiptune music, and for that you might kind of stick to the COIN-OP thing, or even just the plain instruments in the 8-bit. But if you want to like use the sounds to make other kinds of music, then these tweaked instruments in the Super 8-bit pack. It's always going to retain the video game like spirit, but it's got something a little different, a little it's kind of old meets new, the old school inside Ableton Live. I think this one, if I'm not mistaken, has some 2 layers but with different arpeggiators. So you're getting like, I'm just holding down 3 notes. If I were to let you hear, this is the Synth Boy or the Game Boy layer. And then on top of that is the Nintendo layer. Oh, it's another Synth Boy. It's another. No, I'm sorry. No, that's an S. There it is. Put them together. And you've got these like interesting layers of sounds. You can always go inside and kind of tweak the rates. Have all sorts of fun with that. Lots of movement. Plenty of those to work with. Every time I go in here, I'm like, oh my God, I want to start playing with them. Make some like crazy, weird video game future music. But yeah, that's kind of the story with those. I don't know if you guys have any questions or anything you want to add or any thoughts. Yeah. Hey. Hey, that's it then, I guess. I wanted to to be honest, I wanted to put this out in our Discord, um, but I didn't in time. But I want to throw out just the idea that like what do you guys want these meetings to be about? If there's anything you want to go over in particular, next time I have us set up to do subtractive synthesis, so just kind of like synthesizer 101 type stuff, like real basic, but just to go over the different things that you can do to turn um, a synthesizer into a really useful and expressive instrument.
That sounds
But
like a pretty cool topic because I don't really know that much about the ins and outs of synthesis.
oh yeah, cool. Yeah, like it's it's really a nice thing to get into because all of that stuff really does apply to I'm using these concepts in some of these racks, like we're filtering out some sounds, we're using envelopes to modulate things, and um, once you have like those basic ideas, like you can really start going to town. And I think it also, learning that helped me kind of understand like how sounds work in general. Like when I hear like a certain sound, I can kind of like say, oh, like that's a sound that has a fast attack and a long decay. And I can hear like the tone starts out bright and then it kind of gets dull. And those are things you can then apply to synthesis. So you might have play around with like the amplitude envelope to make it have a real quick attack and a short release. And so it's a good like foundational thing, and we'll go into that next time. But if there's ever anything, any requests or any thoughts, I'll do anything you guys want. You know,
I guess when it comes to synthesis, like most of the stuff you're mentioning is all stuff I'm pretty familiar with, but it's more like different types of synthesis. Like you were saying, subtractive synthesis,
yeah,
like that versus different types, and then the methods you would use with each type to achieve different sorts of timbres.
right, yeah. Like you can go into like FM and wavetable, and but even like and like sampling too. Like there's a lot of like the same concepts. Like you find them in different synths. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is like how different waveforms are combined, I guess.
Mhm,
Because the timbres, it's rarely just like one sine wave with some harmonics. There's
right.
more complexity going on there.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a world, that you can really get into like forever. I'm still like discovering how all that stuff works, and it's fun. It's just an exciting journey, into that world. But that's the next one. And I think that's next Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken. Got it written here somewhere. So yeah, I'm happy you guys made it out this time, and Laurent, are you trying to say something? Use the chat. Use the chat. There's a chat in Zoom. That was a first. I haven't seen someone take out a notebook to put up to the camera. That's cool. Let's see. Basics are always a great idea. Just to say I use it. Oh, cool. Awesome. Yeah, if you've got any songs, I'd love to hear. Like it's oh cool, and there's new things. Even better. I'd love to hear what you're doing with it. I mean, sometimes, I put these out and I don't even always get the chance to use all these sounds. So it'd be cool to hear what you do with them. We got a link
I
here.
dropped my album that uses that pack a lot in the chat.
Cool, cool. Yeah. Give that, there it comes. There it is. Yeah, this is, I remember when you shared this with me. That was very exciting for me to like feel like, oh my God, these sounds. I don't have it set up that you can hear it through Zoom right now. I don't have the routing for Safari, but yeah,
That was a
this is.
super fun project, collab with Charlie Milo.
Mhm.
We did like some original songs we just made up for the project.
Yeah,
A couple that were songs of his, like his band, like jazz rock sort of band. We made 8-bit versions of, and then a couple were songs of mine that we then made 8-bit versions of.
did you learn anything interesting doing that? Like, just about like, the way your songs are structured or songwriting in general, like, because like you're definitely limited with these sounds. How was it trying to translate that?
We didn't stay strict with like the track count and stuff like that,
Uh-huh.
but I think having a limitation is great. It's really wonderful. I kind of want to do like a guitar album where I stick to the limitations of like the NES format, so that instead of okay, I could have like 18 guitar layers and glockenspiel and all this other stuff, but like if you only have this many channels, what are you going to do? You have to think very carefully about it. What notes you're
Yeah,
going to use. You have to be very careful about that too.
yeah, yeah. I've tried like a bunch of times, just composing songs on the Nintendo itself using that MIDI cartridge, and you really got to be crafty, like, because I mean, you really like you've got three melodic channels, like that runs out real fast. So you're like trying to figure out ways to like get the most out of it. And it just really deepened my respect for the music that people were able to make back then when they didn't have like really awesome MIDI sequencers like we have now. I don't even understand how they were able to do it, to be honest with you. Like it's just
Oh yeah,
incredible.
insanely creative. Like
Yeah.
a lot of the Zelda sound effects, they're like pitches, but they make it sound like a sound effect, like a shield blocking a sound. It's like a
Mhm.
tone, but it sounds like a
Yeah.
bell ringing kind of or whatever.
Yeah, it's wild. Like I, I'm amazed like that there was so much good music that came out of that time. Like, and just like tunes and melodies that are just so memorable that the second I hear them, like I know them. They've been like subconsciously beaten into my brain for so long as a
Yeah,
kid.
they were forced to have catchy melodies because they couldn't wow you with like all these different sounds and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and I noticed that sometimes with myself, like making music that's like kind of relying on like technology or tricks or sounds rather than like actual songwriting.
Yeah, it's good to focus, get back to the basics and the root and focus on like how are these chords and these notes and these melodies evoking a feeling in me.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. You worked on the Amiga. Yeah, combining the drums and the bass together, like playing off each other. Like even like on the Nintendo, like you can't have more than one drum sound at a time, so they're always like alternating. No kick and snare at the same time, or cymbal or hi hat or anything like that. Hmm. Yeah, that's cool. Well, awesome, guys. Thanks so much for coming out and hanging out for a little while. It's nice to chat and go through some of these, and I feel like excited and inspired to go back and make some like 8-bit music again. So thank you for hanging out and sharing that excitement and enthusiasm. But please, yeah, send some music and post it in the Discord too if you've got anything. Um, yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for stopping along. And I hope you guys have a good rest of the night. Okay, yeah, we could do that. Sure.
Cool, man.
All righty then. You guys take care. I'm gonna get out of my screen and have a good night.